Hey guys, this is Mikro. The devs just put out another expansion related update, and I wanted to talk about the war pushing system that is going to be introduced to New World. So in the past we've had this system where you have to do missions, kind of capture the fort. Overall it takes a very long period of time to push a territory, generally very unfun gameplay, especially if someone is counter pushing you at the same time. It felt like you had to have like a giant Zerg in order for this to be somewhat enjoyable, but typically those haven't existed within the last, I'd say, 6 to 10 months, and we're there at the beginning of the game but haven't been there for a while. And in general, a lot of territories just aren't being pushed because it's not fun to push all the territories at the same time. This has kind of led to a thing where people are able to hold on to a bunch of territories even if they're not actually able to defend pushes versus them all at the same time, because people didn't want to actually they didn't want to push 4 territories at the same time. That was just like unfun. Like, if you can be the top tier company, but you have to push all 4 of their territories at the same time, and they can take it back from you right away, like, it's just very unrewarding, which kind of led to companies still having a bunch of territories, even though there have been systems put into place to kind of limit this. So this change will likely change how this behavior is. What it's going to be is there's going to be 3 times 45-minute influence races a day, and there's going to be a war guaranteed the next day. It's not apparent if these 3 territories will be random or if they'll be kind of cyclic in nature. I imagine they'll tend to be more cyclic in nature because they have to cycle between a war and an invasion. So some territories will have an invasion, then they'll have a war, then it'll be a push kind of zone. So I imagine they'll flip like that. There's going to be a war guaranteed from this, so there's no more this you have to push a bunch of influence in order to get this to clear. Like, it seems like territories are going to be very likely to flip based off the latest dev video. Previously they were talking about how there's like a threshold that you needed to reach. In this last dev video they made it more so sound like that the war was very likely to happen if people pushed at all. So I think it's likely just going to be tons of wars, a lot more content thrown out, but it will kind of have some consequences that we'll get into later. In terms of how these influence races work, there's going to be a fort. There's going to be like kind of PvP towers, kind of key positions that you need to hold, and those positions will tick influence for you, kind of like an outpost rush, where if you hold the outpost, it'll tick for you. And then you can also do missions at the same time. It's not apparent if you'll be able to use mounts, which are going to be coming up in this expansion during these pushes or not, but I imagine that will be kind of interesting to see the kind of mount open world to PvP gameplay. This, I imagine, will be a unique thing to open world because in Outpost Rush you're not going to be able to have mounts, and War you're not going to be able to have mounts. But in this open world circumstance, I don't think they're going to limit the ability to have mounts unless they do it like in a manner where it's like during this influence push you can't use a mount in this zone. So I don't know if they're going to do that or if it's just going to be uh, mount free for all, kind of everyone going everywhere, kind of crazy combat in those zones. But that will be really, really interesting. Some of the consequences for this: there will be a lot more open world PvP. This is just a really big plus. I think the open world PvP is just like one of the main things that New World kind of uh, does very well. It feels very satisfying to do open world PvP. I don't think there will be any like insane ganks on like a chest run thing that's going to be happening anytime soon, because most people don't enjoy doing chest runs a ton anymore, or griefing chest runs a ton anymore, because they're not company wide, they're just kind of server wide events. But it will still be very fun to have that open world aspect. I think for some people it's going to be complete hell though, because there's going to be all those builds that are kind of built to one shot, like cheese, try to go for assassinations. Those are going to be the builds that strive in this open world environment, and it will have access to a bunch of speed because of the mounts potentially. So that will allow those players to be able to make more plays, which will be really interesting, but also may not be fun for people that are just looking to kind of push and then log off. It seems like more of a thing where you need to be invested in that open world PvP. There's no more of this like kind of just run in circles, watch a movie in the background, like don't really care what's going on environment, which I think is just a big plus personally, but for some people that may not be. If these are not cyclic, like the actual influence races, it will be very hard to coordinate wars. So you could get circumstances where people have overlapping timers between multiple servers. They're not able to war on those multiple servers. So this is a thing that could hurt the PvP kind of war logging community of sorts, where on multiple servers, at least on US between US East and US West, all the time slots are accordingly zoned so people can war on every single server if they want to, which is great for some people and terrible for others. So that may hurt that system a bit, because if you have overlapping timers and you have to prioritize one company over another, which will lead to less people having alt accounts on multiple companies. This alt account problem is also being solved by the expansion having a $30 threshold, so if you're someone that doesn't want to fork over a bunch of money to have all your accounts with the expansion and have to level up all of those artifacts that are going to be really, really important for certain builds, then you are just not going to have a good time. You can't hold on to territory by purely counter pushing anymore, which is big for, I'd say, bigger companies who do not want to declare in smaller companies, and it's also big for smaller companies who don't want bigger companies to limit the amount of wars that they get over a certain period of time. So bigger companies that have like 3 to 4 territories on certain servers, if they had, say, all their 3 territories pushed in one day, they would, by this influence race change, they'd likely lose those territories and not be able to hold them. But if they're on more of a cyclic pattern, this would not be something that would be as bad. But there's also the circumstance where there's people who go for double, triple, quad decks, and then they have these territories and they're not able to hold in an actual war situation whatsoever, but they'll counter push the open world PvP in order to have these zones, which is a viable strategy to how New World has been formulated, because people just don't enjoy pushing because it's just not very fun, so they figured out a way to hold on to a zone by doing such, and that will not be possible. These war territories are able to flip consistently and are able to be pushed consistently. You'll actually have to be good at war to actually hold your territory, but you won't be able to have a bunch of territories potentially from a big company standpoint if these kind of patterns for how these races and how when the wars are not timeable cyclic events. If they're guaranteed to flip, then there will not be a way to kind of organize when times happen, and then there will be a lot of conflicts between multiple servers, multiple companies. That will be really interesting. It will also hurt giant companies that hold multiple territories. I've already kind of talked about that. It should increase the amount of flipping and territories held by companies. I imagine there won't be a company that can hold more than 2 to 3 territories if these like 3 flipping zones happen consistently. The maximum you should be able to hold with this system is 4 if they are cyclic, because you would have like if there's 12 territories and then 3 of them flip a day, then you just need to get 4 of them that are on different days in terms of flipping, and then you'd be able to hold 4 forever, which is something I don't know if they thought about completely, if they are cyclic or if they're not cyclic events, so that will be interesting to see. And it should just be overall very positive for the sort of PvP community, because this is effectively creating another game mode out of this open world environment. Like, we previously just had Outpost Rush, we had 3v3. Open world existed for, I'd say, a brief period of time with Great Cleave when the missions were super, super good for the PvP track. But other than that, that open world aspect hasn't really been a thing for a long period of time, and this very likely will introduce that open world aspect to come back to the New World PvP. In addition to all of this, they've made Eden Grove a capturable slash claimable territory. I imagine First Light will not be a claimable territory, so we will be back up to 12 claimable territories with 3 rotating territories, so that kind of makes sense. And this Eden Grove settlement will make the most money out of any territory right now, so I imagine I'll have to rebalance how the actual income from zones will work. But as of right now, we have what do you call it? Brimstone, we have Windsward, we have Everfall. Those are kind of in their own tier. Monarchs, Eben, and I believe are in their own tier, and along with Reek and what do you call it? The water territory at the top right of the map, Morningdale. Like, those are kind of in their own tier, and then after that, the other zones just don't make as much money. Like, Brightwood doesn't make as much money, Restless Shores doesn't make as much money, Lever's Fen doesn't make as much money. So that will be interesting to see how those are balanced as well. But overall, seems very, very fun. Let me know what you guys think of this. Let me know what kind of builds you think are going to come out of this. If people are going to hop back on the musket and try to get on these, like, forts and try to snipe people off their horses, you think that's going to happen? Or do you think that people are going to be more war-oriented with a setup with a 20-man push group like a raid group basically that all Zergs together runs around the map and does things together. If that's the case, we'll get a lot of open world PvP with the 20-man versus 20-man, which would be super, super fun. And overall, it seems like a very exciting time to be playing New World. And I will see you guys in the next video.
Just step. Get on.
We win, just stack.
Yeah, we win.
Stack.
Oh, don't say that.
Get on,
We have huge respawns coming through B.
B is free, just kill bottom,
Oh, sorry, bottom left. Bottom left. Bottom shower.
Come down, Crooks.
Focus
I'm
bottom
down.
left.
We still win. They're coming bottom right.
We win.
Yeah, we
Oh my god.
Good shit, guys.
Let's go.
GG's.